There we go. Now I will share my screen. Welcome everyone to the Madison, Wisconsin admin group. We're going to be taking a look at Winter 23. And as always, this is going to be more of what does Squire and Brian think were important out of the 5,036 pages of release notes? Which means that if you are using, say, Experience Cloud or Health Cloud or whatever the case may be, you are going to want to take a look at the release notes and or take a look at whatever the release readiness videos that do come out for that particular cloud, because we will not be covering it here today. What we are going to be focused on are predominantly what I would consider basic platform stuff. So all admin related features predominantly, which you would get if you had it like a Sales Cloud or Service Cloud license, standard stuff. So we'll go over the wonderful overview. Thanks to Better Partners for providing the Zoom call, which feels weird to thank myself in this regard. Jen usually does this. But this is how you can reach out to us. We do have an email address, and predominantly you can reach out to us through our community group. Wisconsin is led by myself and Jen Bowen, who unfortunately cannot be here today, but she'll be at Dreamforce. If people are attending, you can look her up there. And then we are co-partners with Milwaukee, who is currently led by Squire Kershner and a yet unnamed person. Unfortunately, Jen could not did not have the time to be co-leader anymore, and so she stepped down. And so Squire, do you want to, since it's your group?
Yeah, plug a little bit. I just I mention it pretty regularly. The job is full of fun and fanfare. You can tell how much Brian and I enjoy it. There's some pretty great articles on the community as far as what is not expected, because that's the wrong way to describe it, but it's about engagement, it's about participation, it's about bringing your passion for the platform to everyone on the call. So if you are interested, please reach out to me via Success or by Twitter, @Kershner__C. I'll be happy to send any links along. I've had a couple people ask, and what we want to do is just try to get a feel for who's interested, and just have some conversations and talk about the longevity and go from there. So it's a lot of fun, and it just gives you an opportunity to share like we always do. So.
Yep, and you do not have to be an expert.
Please.
Okay. When I started this, I definitely was not an expert. I'm not sure I would qualify myself as an expert now, depending on the topic of Salesforce these days, since it's so big. Honestly, the number one important attribute for being a good co-leader is simply just being engaged. Logistics of just getting things scheduled, helping find topics, encouraging people to be speakers and things like that. That's honestly what takes most of it, and it just takes time. So why are we here? Well, we're here primarily because for networking. We're all Salesforce users and admins of some degree, and we want to help each other. So we're here to one, help each other in our careers, either it be through knowledge or by simply networking with each other and maybe helping us grow our careers. I know there are some folks in here that got new careers, new jobs because of people that they met through the community group, and that's what we're here for. We're here to share the good things and the bad things. You had a project fail and you learned some really hard lessons from that. That's what this group is for. You have some successes. That's what this group is for. You have some interesting things that you saw online or at a different session and things like that. You want to spread the knowledge and the wealth. That's what we're here for. This is an open, friendly forum. There is no such thing as a stupid question or a stupid answer unless it's coming from me. So please never hesitate to just speak up and want to share your mind. Okay. That being said, we do want to hear from you. And so if you have a story, be it about a success or a failure, or you learned something that you're like, wow, I didn't learn that before, that is so cool, reach out to us, because we would like you to talk about it at the user group. It doesn't have to be an hour-long presentation. It could literally be a 15-minute, hey, I had this project, this is what I was trying to do, here are some challenges or why we were trying to do this, and this is what resulted from, and this is my takeaways. It could be something that simple. Because I will guarantee you that our experience and knowledge level is a huge spectrum in this group, all the way from people who've been doing this for over a decade to people who are just starting, and maybe this is the first user group they've ever attended to. There is no nugget that isn't worth bringing up, no matter how basic you think it is, because I will guarantee you there have been times I've been to meetings where someone's like, hey, did you know you could add multiple fields onto a page layout at once by just holding the shift key? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I've been doing this for 7 years. I had no clue. Wow, that would have made my life easier 7 years ago. So please reach out to us. We would love to have you talk to it. If you're nervous about it, we will walk you through the expectation. You can do a dry run. We will help you out. Just let us know. All right. We have a whole bunch of community groups out there in the wild now. We have developer groups. If you're interested in primarily development, we've got our 2 admin groups. There's some marketing groups out there. We have groups in Neenah, Green Bay. We're all over the place now. So all these links, you can find them under their friends section in our chatter group in the Trailblazer community page. Check them out if you're interested in doing that. I'm not sure where we are with Salesforce Saturdays, since that's been in person, and I think that's been kind of on the rocks with the pandemic. But you may want to join just simply to keep in the loop when that starts meeting in person again. This is going to shock you. Dreamforce is this month. I'm sure none of us have seen any of the market materials that have come out at all. It's probably been very sad and quiet, but that's coming out here on the 20th. And then we have Florida Dreaming, and that's pretty much it for the United States. Stuart, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I have a request. So upcoming event, I am a representative from your sister state, Minnesota. I am one of the co-leaders of the Twin Cities community group here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And Dreamforce is coming up, and we have a couple speakers from our local group who are attending Dreamforce and actually speaking at Dreamforce. And next Friday, our developer group is hosting 2 speakers. So I'll put the link in the chat. And we would like to have as many people come that whether you're going to Dreamforce or not, and you want to hear 2 sessions that are going to be at Dreamforce, we're going to be doing dry runs to anyone that wants to listen. One of them is on development context, and the other one is going to be kind of designer, architect, BA sort of topic.
That would be a good topic.
But please, if you are free Friday afternoon, next Friday afternoon, and want to kind of take a part in the Dreamforce sessions, feel free to join us. That's all.
Thanks, Stuart.
I'll post the link in the
chat. Pop in the chat, and Squire, if you could grab those so we can post them in our chatter group after the fact, that'd be great.
You got it.
All right. This is time to open things up. Does anyone have anything they want to announce? New jobs, job openings, celebrations? Hey, you just got a new I'm the Minds certificate. You just passed a Salesforce test. Or anything else? Anyone got anything? Going. Okay, if something comes up, you'll let us know. Onward to Winter 23. So Squire is going to kick us off here. Squire, I forgot to check with you to see if you managed to get a copy of the slide deck.
I did.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we'll pass it off to Squire to kick us off with the Summer 23 release.
All right, let me get over there. Come on, machine. All right, everybody seeing okay?
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Okay, cool. All right, so let's get kicked off with a couple of the most critical updates that we felt everyone should be aware of. So the first one, the enhanced domains deployment is going full on enabled with Winter 23. It's been part of the critical update, or they don't call it that, the important update detail for quite a few months. Hopefully you've seen that in the release notes. You've done the testing in your orgs. If not, just a reminder, this is going to happen this month. And what you're going to be seeing is a change to the way the URLs for your My Domains are displayed. And so there's going to be, the reasoning behind it is, of course, for security purposes, but there's going to be some testing involved for anything that you've hard-coded URLs for, third-party applications, some integrations potentially. Do not wait. Get in there right now. There is a critical update help tile in that section of setup, and it'll walk you through the things you need to check and get those things tested. And quite a bit of documentation available as well from both release notes as well as the main site, the main help site. So jump in there and get ahead of it. Next up, the other critical update is, as we know, in February, MFA was enabled. Sorry, the February 22nd deadline to try to make sure that you're on MFA due to contractual requirements has long passed. Going forward, we're going to be having MFA automatically enabled in orgs. And so you should be aware of the settings and requirements for your org to ensure that your users can log in. Keep in mind that it's a contractual obligation, meaning that no one's going to be prevented from logging in except for the standard MFA requirements. But you are out of contractual obligation or a contractual agreement if you're not having MFA engaged. Similar to the auto enablement of enhanced domains, there's some great trails, some walkthroughs, and some help documents in setup for you to ensure that you're ready to be checked. The trail itself is great. Jump in there and review it if you've got the opportunity before that September enablement date. And just to ensure that we are all on the same page. So Salesforce is going to turn it on. Users are going to have to use MFA. If your single sign-on addresses the MFA requirement, you're fine, but you need to have that enabled and handled. If you're already using MFA, nobody's going to know the difference. And if need be, there is a recommendation that admins can deactivate MFA once it goes on if you're having a challenge, but go back to the contract says you have to be in MFA compliance. And then moving forward, you should be focusing on that security. So a lot in those two. Don't want to get too deep into details because it really is an org by org assessment, but I want to make sure if anybody has any questions or additional comments about those two, I want to open the door.
Is there anyone who has not already migrated to require their users to use MFA at this point?
I do personally have a handful of clients myself that they're smaller, I've been having the conversation with them, but we haven't been turning it on for them at this point. Does anybody know how this is going to affect API users or, any of those that have that higher level of authorization?
The MFA requirement is for user interface only.
Okay.
So if it's an API only user, it shouldn't impact them. But if it's a user that can do both UI and API, it will.
And I'm going to make you focus on it shouldn't, because API only users can be configured to use a standard login password OAuth connection, which will get blocked. So you check your API connections, your connected app should tell you. Hopefully no one's got a login password configuration in their APIs.
If you're doing OAuth, technically because it's OAuth, you're connecting through a UI.
Yeah. So, but yes, correct.
Yeah, and that doesn't even really affect me or a lot of my clients personally, but I think it's good to know for anybody that's doing that further development and using those API keys of how this may or may not affect them down the road, or if they're using OAuth, that's definitely something good to know with, it might affect them.
I would say predominantly for most of our customers, enabling MFA has been very, very minor, as long as the users are prepped. The worst case scenario is your users aren't prepped, they don't have an authenticator app downloaded or a UB key, security key, and MFA suddenly required and no one knows what to do. Right? Or you don't have your processes defined for what happens if someone breaks or forgets their phone or whatever the case may be.
So I've got a client, and it's actually an old employer of mine, who's got about 60 guys on a shop floor who are only allowed to log in through the IP address that these machines on the floor are from. Is there a way to get around this for them, or
No.
does that IP?
IP restriction is not part of the MFA requirements. So Salesforce has a whole MFA QA out there, an FAQ, and it'll walk you through what is the expectation. But simply saying, hey, you have to be on this particular IP address is not good enough.
Not enough. MFA FAQ. That's how you say it, right?
Yes. Thanks, John.
And you can get there pretty quick from the setup MFA requirement link that's at the top of setup. So you'll be able to get through all that stuff.
So Jonathan, the answer is you have to implement it. You can turn it off. Salesforce is going to automatically enable it for you. If you turn it off, though, you are no longer within your contract with Salesforce. And talk to attorneys to what that may mean for you.
I won't do it then. I was just curious because I'm sure there's going to get a lot of, feedback or people not wanting to do it. So
there are, yeah, I mean, well, I don't want to do it isn't good enough, but if you have a genuine reason for why you can't release MFA at this time, reach out to your account executive and have the discussion, because they may give you a short-term exclusion to that requirement. But you got to have it. It's actually in your best interest to have it.
and when is this released?
What did you say? September 22nd, Squire?
That is
Okay.
that is when all new orgs will have it automatically enabled. You needed to address this in February of 22 was when it really hit the contractual obligation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're talking about the point where things are going to automatically happen or enforcement's coming. So
Okay, I'll get on it. Thank you.
You bet. Brian, I added a couple extra attendees while we were talking, and I added them to the list. So
thank you.
you bet. All right, so let's move on to User Access Permissions Assistant. This is super slick. I know a lot of people out there have used, including myself, for years, used Perm Comparator and a bunch of other third-party tools to really help try to manage everything that has to do with permissions and user access. There's an installable app, User Access and Permissions Assistant, that's available in the App Exchange. It's the same app that's been used for quite a long time with a handful of the governance and security super badges. Think of it the same feature functionality, except it's now managed and supported by Salesforce. It's got some great feature tools, and I highly recommend admins installing it to help manage everything, especially with the transition that we're seeing to permission sets as being your primary access management tooling. You want to be able to see both profiles and permissions as quickly as possible in the best ways. So again, it's on the App Exchange. Definitely feel free to download it into a Sandbox if you want to test it, but it's pretty great. What it does is a couple things. So it gives you this analyzer function, so you can put a bunch of filters into the app and really like drill down and get a view of specific permissions across permission criteria and profile criteria. It's really going to be a one-stop shop for you to try to assess everything that's going on there. And I'll bring it up in a little bit more visible org in a second here. But the other thing that's really nice about it is that there's a converter that allows you to take a profile and turn the settings into a permission set. It's early in that feature functionality. I haven't pressure tested it as well as I'd like to, but so far it looks pretty good. So as you're starting to transition away from profiles, you've got a roadmap for that. This is one of the ways to help you get there, especially in a really robust org. Secondly, there's reporting on the permissions and access that you can jump to. One of the odd things about the app is that the app itself has a reports tab. It's not a standard report tab. Don't get confused by that. It's actually the built-in reports tied to the app and gives you some drill down abilities as far as the profiles, permissions, the users, the access. And then the last big one is that you can tie specific permissions to permission sets and kind of that perm comparator feature functionality again, but with a nice overlay. Last piece of it is that you can manage all your groups and your permissions and help work through assessing large org specifically, assignments, access, etc. Let's leave this for just a second. I just want to bring up an org with the screen a little bit more visible. I'm trying to remember which one I have it in. It's not this one. Come on. Don't you hate it when the little pop-up bar won't go away after you hover away from it?
If it's any consolation,
Indeed.
we don't see it.
Oh, wait, you're not seeing my org?
No, we see your org. We just didn't see the pop-up.
Oh yeah, it just looks like me unable to use the mouse, right? Yeah,
That's
so,
right.
All right. So here we are on the perm analyzer. It should be a little bit more visible. The starting point is let's analyze by user permission or permission set groups. I like the permission one as the best demo. Once you go in there, you can check for what type of permissions. Let's try, let's do an object and let's see what account has going on for it. And you want to know if it's got create on accounts. And now we've got some nice filter abilities to say, okay, well, here's my profiles that have that access or my permission sets or what have you. And obviously play with this to your heart's content, but it's going to give you some really nice drill in perspective on what you're able to see from this analyzer. On the converter side, I can take any one of these profiles, and if I wanted to, minimize a couple more screens here and get rid of this. So if I took this and converted permission set, I don't want to break my org right now, but this will take all of the settings in your custom profiles and turn it into a permission set to help you get moving in the direction of that conversion. And obviously there's some nice screens here if you want to make sure that you don't accidentally break something or you want to check the licensing. From the report side, visibility of all those data points, like I mentioned in the slide deck, while this is loading up, as like I said, in several of the super badges, the dev org that you install and the package you install to it brings this into a very robust samples sandbox that you can play around with and not worry about breaking anything if you want to do that before you actually put it in your org. But again, if we jump into it, let's check users and look for user permissions for can they access activities, and we can multi-select. And let's check for me, because sure, why not? And run that report. This is pretty slick. It's going to give you that output that you need to know. Why can Brian edit leads? Here we go. And then lastly, in the manage section, running real slow, which is making the demo super exciting. But I'll stop beating this to death. It's a great set of tools, and I highly recommend checking it out.
And this requires an app install, right?
Yes, it's from App Exchange.
So a good example of something you definitely would want to install for admins only, if for no other reason, you don't want to cause confusion with people wondering why there's 2 report tabs.
Right.
How granular does that reporting get on that app?
As granular as you add filters to. So in that upper section, you're looking for very specific settings, and then you can go deeper and say, well, for those settings, what are those criteria? So in object, it'll say, well, here, let me go back. So really quick here, if I just do this, it should pop right up. Live demos are the best demos. There's your user access and permissions assistant, and it is free and is supported by Salesforce. We'll jump out of here, maybe. Let's go back to report. So by picking user, it's going to give you criteria for the report of that pertain to the user settings. If I jump to permission set, it's going to change some of the options. So like there's no field permissions in permission set right now, hint, hint, looking ahead. But if I go to object and then I can say field permissions and I can look for certain fields and et cetera, like it's super robust. It does, if you've got perm comparator in your head, think that on steroids. All right, let me jump back over to the deck, maybe. Let's see if I'm capable of sharing. All right, so as I mentioned, field level security for fields on permission sets is coming. It's in beta right now. You do have to request this setup, or sorry, you have to enable this setup in your org in order to allow it to happen. But just like when you create a field, and there's that screen that pops up that says, what profiles do you want to have access to it? It now, instead of profile, gives you permission sets, and you can do the exact same settings. It's one or the other, though. There's not both. And if you need to do it one way and then do it another way, you have to enable or disable that setting. Beta feature, lots can change between now and when it goes live, but a really cool tool to start thinking about how you're going to handle permission sets in the future. And so I, again, am capable of jumping screens. Come on, machine.
The glory of live demos.
Well, it's this, when the screen won't go away, that hover just takes forever. All right, so let's jump over to here. So many windows. There we go. So in user management settings, down at the bottom here. So where you would set up the expiration dates for permission sets and profile groups, here's the setting for beta if you want to start playing around with assigning field permissions to permission sets at build. And then similarly, when you're on a field, if you change the field type or go to field level security settings, so let's see if we can get that demo to actually work with the capabilities that I've promised everyone. Let's just randomly grab one here. So if I jump in here, because it's on, if I go to field level security, you'll see it's only looking at permission sets now. Very similar screen or identical screen to profile, but now it's only permission sets. So. All right, back to my deck. Questions on any of that? I'm going real fast because we have a lot to cover today. All right. So let's start with dynamic related lists. There are new features in dynamic related lists that allows you to multi-select filters. Happy to demo it. Not a super exciting demo because of it's literally just adding these X's. So as you add values, just like when you're adding pick lists to a report filter, you can multi-select and they'll all get assigned to the value list for your filter. Max of 30 rows, and the result set is still applied to the dynamic related lists, but going that one step further, now you don't have to use those custom install packages like actually I think it's called enhanced related lists, is the one that used to be on labs. Now you're getting more and more feature functionality to be able to filter and select and display what you need to display.
But still no view all button.
I'm sorry?
But still no view all button off the list.
No, not at this time. The recommendation that I'm aware of is that you should have a view all related list and then these filtered lists to help pare down your total.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is them trying to figure out if you hit view all, do you really mean view all that meets the filters or literally view all?
And hopefully, I mean, sometimes some of this comes with planning as well, right? So if you create a filter related list, hopefully that filter related list is described and laid out in such a way that would say, here's the things you really care about in this section. Do you want to see every related record? That's a different related list. I mean, it's about a lot about UX. So hopefully that helps. Super excited to say that dynamic forms are now available on account, contact, opportunity. That is super exciting. It's also not something to just dive headfirst into. It requires a Lightning page upgrade to enable it. And Brian and I were discussing last week, and I didn't get a chance to test. Are you able to upgrade a page? Has anybody been able to confirm or deny that? So what, downgrade? Downgrade's not the right term, but I haven't seen that feature. So
I forgot to check.
Yep. But I mean, the upgrade simply, I shouldn't say simply, but it makes a major change to the Flexi page content. It gives you the same templates that you saw with the custom objects, but because so many of our orgs are tied directly to account and contact and opportunity, upgrading that landing page could be impactful. So be prepared for it. So otherwise, features are the same.
Desktop only.
Yes, correct. Come on. All right. Next big enhancement is the custom address fields. This is really exciting, I think. Being able to add an address, but get that location breakdown of an address field without adding a bunch of custom fields that don't look and feel like everything else you've done. This is one that I think I'm going to attempt to demo because it's pretty cool. We'll see if we can actually make it work. So if I go back over to, we're just going to go right back to the fields account security object just because I can. If I go way down to the bottom and pick address, actually, you know what? Just because it'll be easier to demo, I'm going to jump over to.
They didn't bother to alphabetize it within the rest of the list that's alphabetized?
Nope. It's new. You want it at the bottom of the list. Come on. All right.
They did it when they added rich text, Squire.
It's early. Maybe it'll change before it actually releases. So if I just do this and say, I'm going to create an address field and I'm going to call it super secret address and make it and now I jump back to my screens, so many screens. So now in details, I added I have to refresh 1 second. Don't let me down. Don't let me down, demo.
You're suffering from a cache issue?
Probably. Yeah, darn it. All right.
You don't need to see the secret special address.
No, but it looks and acts just like this one, right? So when I jump into mailing address, I get a bunch of fields. Super secret address would now have this same sequence. It has the built-in underlying address fields, concatenating them all together for reporting and all the same feature functionality. But now I don't have to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique non-aligned fields for my addresses. This works on all standard objects and custom objects with, I think there's a couple that outliers don't apply, but they're in the documentation. I like task. I don't think you can create an address field on a task yet, but all right. Going back.
Couple of questions with that, Squire.
Yep.
Do you know, how is that going to work within Salesforce Maps? Is the are you going to be able to geo location those custom fields as well? And then also, do you know, is that going to apply to stay in country pick lists if you have those enabled in the org?
So and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody sees otherwise, state country pick list will apply because it sees it as part of the address global suite.
I assumed it would, but I just wanted to ask to verify.
Yeah. And then as far as maps and geolocation, I don't honestly know if it's going to handle it. I would assume it does, but I didn't test that. Does anybody have any background on that?
If it converts the latitude and longitude fields, then the answer would be yes, I assume, but not sure.
Yeah. And
Something to test, I guess.
I'm just I'm not going to bring it up because I'm showing my incompetence by switching screens, but I want to look and see with how many new geolocation fields popped up by creating my super secret location. So I'm just doing that on the backside, talk amongst yourselves.
So Kimberly said that they enabled a custom address on leads and it broke their lead conversion.
Interesting.
So Kimberly, I asked if are you mapping it to a custom address field or to a different address field or not mapped at all?
I'm curious how that broke the lead conversion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll post in, there's another person who found this, which we found on Trailhead after we spent a month trying to recreate a new sandbox.
Oh gosh.
I think at first we were just trying to map it to primary address on account or contact, I forget. And then we took away the mapping, like just any mapping at all, and it still broke. So having a custom address field on lead through an unexpected error anytime you would try to do any sort of lead conversion.
Interesting.
Neat.
Yeah. I have so many questions that I'm going to follow up on because I would like to know way more about that. So just let me scribble for a second. Because I would assume that if that is an expected or unexpected outcome, it's going to pop up a lot in conversations.
Especially considering they listed it as generally available.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's there. It's ready to use.
That is a really good piece of feedback.
And I'm wondering if there has something to do with the default mapping. And now when you add an address, if you have to like reconfigure your conversions or something. So let's take that offline and maybe circle back with an update and success. And keep us posted as you hear more. I mean, you brought it up. Now everyone's freaking out. So we're all going to hear about it. Oops. All right. Next up, app cloning.
Sure.
Sorry, I think I was talking over someone. Oh, okay. Next up, app cloning. It's in beta. Like always, beta is beta. Keep it to yourself. But if you want to test something, you can go into the Lightning Experience App Manager setup and enable the app cloning feature, which allows you to pick any app and clone it. It's built into the naming. I don't need to say more, but I'm going to keep talking for some reason. Cool feature if you're building lots of apps and you're trying to get replication. Cloning also has its own challenges, whether it's record cloning or object cloning or app cloning or whatever. Be careful. Take your time with. Make sure you understand what you're doing when you clone it. But it's good way to get ahead of a large implementation. So, especially
if you're doing it in sandbox only.
Yeah.
Especially because it's a beta feature.
Yeah, like you mean like you should only be doing it in sandbox only until you're super sure that it works?
I'm sure we're all building everything in a sandbox unless it's a report.
Yes. Everybody's nodding their head and no one's looking shocked or awed.
Yeah, no one turned off their camera to hide. Yeah.
I will say this: Anna has been really good about always building in production, and I loved it. So,
you know it.
All right, unified task management tool. So The to-do list feature is part of the release notes. It allows you to build a utility bar pop-up that allows you to manage all of your tasks. I cannot get it to work, so I cannot demo it. It's still part of the release notes, which makes me think that it's just me and not that it's not part of the release. Has anybody had a chance to make this work? On paper, it's super cool being able to just pop up your to-do list from notes.
My org is on the NER release and I don't see it.
Yeah. So for the time being, I'm going to say that the page in the release notes make it look cool. The demo that I saw like a month and a half ago looked pretty cool. I've never been able to get to work, so we're going to leave it right there.
You're recording, aren't you?
Oh yes, and I'm hoping someone hears.
Then I won't say what I wanted to say. But this is a great idea. I love an idea. It's a great idea. I love this idea. It's a great idea. I love this idea.
Gee.
There's other
what's
apps
it,
that do this.
Sorry,
that I've
Jeff?
used there's other apps that do this that I've used before. Do the same thing, build a toolbar, pull up your tasks. It's worked great.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we'll keep looking at this one. If it comes up, we'll come back to it and just do a quick demo in one of the sessions. So, lastly, coming with the release, there's going to be new sandbox types that allow you to identify whether your sandbox is going to be on a preview instance or not. It's also going to be able to display things like whether you're using Hyperforce and allow you. There's a cloning aspect of Hyperforce that's going to improve the overall feature functionality there. And then last thing is you're going to be able to understand the publishing dates that are coming forward. There's also going to be, and down there in the bottom right hand corner in super fine forward-looking statements, the promise that when you create a sandbox, you'll also be able to say, I want it on current or the next release, but that's future-looking statement. So just cross your fingers. Hopefully
just having the type is nice. I don't know about everyone else, but I hated going, all right, this was created on this date. Let me go look at this long list of dates Salesforce provided to figure out am I going to get on the release or not. So helpful.
Agreed. Field level security for field and perm sets, duplicate slides, so we'll skip past it. That's my mistake. Territory assignments to leads, new addition to territory settings, being able to have not only your accounts and your opportunities and your cases, but now your leads fall into territory management criteria. Really, really valuable, I think, to a lot of lead-driven orgs. Historically, ended up kind of doing this by queue, right? Anybody?
Badly.
I think so, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's not really territory assignment. You just kind of hit it and try to
fake it.
Yeah. So this is pretty cool. So looking forward to see some people demo this for us at a future state. Hint, hint. Show us how cool this is when you use it in your org. Was it subtle enough, Jason, Brian?
What was subtle?
Like trying to get someone to demo this?
Well, I didn't pick up on that at all.
Oh man, I gotta get a bigger stick. Couple more quick items. Einstein Search for Knowledge. Einstein Search has improved to incorporate the knowledge suite of the platform. So help you to find and filter more quickly in that knowledge space. Helps to prioritize, or not prioritize, categorize and resolve issues because your knowledge search is hitting more to the point. And you can do additional things like attach them to cases and help your overall case resolution. That whole process becomes better. So, Brian, do we have service admins that join the calls? I don't think Milwaukee has very many. Anybody on service?
I know we have a few in the group, but I don't know if there's any of them is on the call.
Okay.
John's Eggleston's on Service Cloud.
Cool. John, is this an exciting opportunity for you?
We just implemented knowledge. Actually, we used advanced communities knowledge as an add-on to enhance the basic knowledge functionality object in Salesforce, and that was just because the basic didn't meet some of our requirements, mostly for how articles could be formatted and categorized and navigated. But the better search is always welcome. It's fun to have that in the top bar. Really, even though like it's, I think, title only search in the top bar, as soon as you hit enter, you get full body search of the you can't normally search a rich text field. So having that full body search of the articles is really handy.
Thanks, John.
I have a question on that. Do you upload files directly into your knowledge base, or do you do any?
As a matter of best practice, no. But in terms of getting stuff over from a previous, you're consolidating from a couple of websites, things got either linked there. Mostly they're just linked there and left on the old thing to be cleaned up later.
Yeah, and then you can't search those except for the titles, right?
I do not know. That's a great question.
Body of the file would not be searchable.
Body of the file is not searchable. I just didn't know if Einstein ever, if this Einstein search ever talks about that, searching files.
Just to clarify, you're saying the body of the file itself is searchable, or within the space of knowledge? Because
yeah, an attachment inside of knowledge.
Sorry, Stuart, go ahead.
Well, an attachment inside of knowledge.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Probably not searchable.
searchable, right? I mean, depending on the file size and type.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
You bet. All right, jumping over to analytics, a couple new improvements in the report and dashboard space. The big one is that the unified experience for analytics home, don't be freaked out by the analytics label. That is connected to CRMA, but the analytics home allows you to compile both analytics and reports and dashboard information into a singular portal. So pretty neat and functional way to kind of see it all versus the way we do right now. We're looking for reports and dashboards. It is enabled by the admins, and so again, like always, spin up a sandbox, turn it on, see how it's functional. I don't believe you can control, off the top of my head, I don't remember reading it anyway, that you can control who sees and who doesn't see the analytics home. It's either on or off, but the features are great. So, and actually, I might even have a demo. I might have a demo of that. I'll jump back to that in a second. Custom report types for views and objects. Now you can actually see the object relationships in the report before you start the report. I know I have plenty of challenges trying to remember how everything's wired together and start halfway down a report and then realize that you had with or without setup wrong. You have to start all over and then you pull your hair out. So this is kind of a neat little feature. We've also got the beta feature being able to filter report types by fields that are on the report types to be able to sneak up even closer to what you're shooting for. You have to contact Salesforce to enable this feature, so I can't demo that right now, but being beta, hopefully we're going to see that as a potential rollout in the near future. So why don't I try to break something again here. And come on. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing this and share this. Hopefully. So in reports and dashboards settings, down here at the bottom of Unified Analytics Home, I've enabled this. And so now tab that gives me a full visibility of everything analytic in my org. And I'm not a CRMA user currently, so I'm expecting to see nothing that has to do with analytics, but I've got all these great reports, all my recent analytics. Can do all my searches here, browsing and favorites, but you've got this great singular source for all things, and you can even create new reports, dashboards, folders, everything from one unified implementation. So, and when I jump over to report, fingers crossed, I do firms and contacts. There's my object relationship. So I'm doing all firms with or without contacts. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Long time overdue, I think. Time check. Boy, I'm dragging this out. Sorry, everybody.
You had a lot, Squire. Be fair with yourself.
I also never stop talking. Everyone is tired of me and my voice. Okay, last couple things, then let's zip through the rest of this. So new options with the from addresses and list emails. So I'm going to move this picture down a little bit. So you're excited about this, Brian. Why are you so excited about this?
Are you kidding me? I just this last week, I've had 3 different customers go, can I change the from address when I'm sending a list email? And I'm going, oh.
So I think there's a couple pieces here, and maybe I'm wrong, but so a lot of times I think admins and customers in general forget that you can override your org-wide address and have a list of org-wide addresses available to you, right? So first thing is, if you didn't know you could do that, it's super important that you know you can do that. Second thing is that you could, I shouldn't say always, but up until this release, you could use those org-wide addresses in like email alerts and things like that, but you couldn't do it from the list email, right? So this is like is this the last nail in the coffin as far as like emails not looking like they come from Brian Kwong at betterpartners.com?
No, but that really depends on a whole bunch of things like the email client and stuff like that. So for example, if you used an email, it will come over as from sales@company.com on the behalf of person's name and email address. But because that's stored in the header, it's one of those options that you can turn off, but it basically reduces your email security compliance, which means you can get blocked as spam more often. And it's completely dependent upon the email client of the person receiving it, whether or not they see it.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's much Salesforce can actually do about that.
Yeah. Understood. All right. Thanks, Brian. And then just a reminder that for verification of email address through Salesforce, your emails have to be validated. You're going to get a link that says this. Yes, this is mine. It's part of it, part of the email security that you were just talking about, Brian. And so they're going to be preventing non-SSO emails with Spring 23. So there's quite a bit to unpack there. This is also part of one of the critical updates, I believe. I think it's an older one, but check out the article and do your testing. Couple more in-app content. The Salesforce in-app guidance package continues to be improved, and now they have a full list of pre-built, and they'll continue to add to it pre-built in-app guidance that you can utilize, categorized by this list, and it's continued to grow, but allow you to start to really engage your users with in-app guidance type prompts, not just, hey, did you know Salesforce type stuff, but like, are you using your marketing or your platform or your setups appropriately? You leverage them, because that content's going to continue to grow. Guidance Center got a rename. It used to be called Learning Paths. Now it's over to Guidance Center. Just a quick call out: if you are using it, your user, make sure your users don't freak out when the label changes. If you're not using it, some great tools there. And this is not Brian and I were talking about this last week. It's not the
Paid.
or the guidance, right? The app guidance, right? This is just having a guidance center for knowledge. Sorry, Brian.
And this is not enablement center, which is also something different too.
Correct.
There's a lot of centers going on.
Yes, there are.
It needs to be a center of centers.
A center.
Center.
Couple changes with in-app guidance in general. There's more ways to use the in-app guidance and target parts of the page. I believe there's 6. I'm trying to bring it up right now. 6 new changes, and it has this background feed. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Great. I'm always curious how many people are using in-app guidance. It's such an easy way to just kind of force feed features and functionality to your users and make them available, make them aware of it.
Karen just created her first one.
Really?
If they actually read them instead of just closing out of them right away.
Well, you know what's funny is now with the reporting, there's 2 pieces of this. One is us doing our heavy lifting, and the second one is getting leadership and change management to say, this is what I did, and here's what I wanted to have happen, and here's what the outcomes are. How do we get people to do it? So don't lose track on the back end of, hey, leadership, I need you to help me help our users, right?
Yeah, Chris said that they have created a few for user adoption. Christian said they used a little in the past, but most users clicked away. Marie said she had time, she would.
Yeah, isn't that always the fact? Make time. It's especially with the pre-built content, it doesn't take very long to find one that you think is applicable and implement, and find the opportunity to start building that engagement. I was right, there are 6, but I didn't have the post. So you can now target list view drop-down menus, pins and headers, the app name, the app launcher, items in nav bar, record tabs and subtabs, and the highlights panel fields. And all of them can have that gray background behind it. And with that, I'm done rambling. I'll let Brian do something more valuable.
Thanks, Squire.
Of course.
All right. Oh, well, I should close down the other PowerPoint so I don't accidentally do the wrong one. That would be horrendous. And it's not starting me on the slide that I wanted. That's also wonderful. Is this the right one? There we go. All right. So share my screen. So thanks, Squire. That was a lot. I'll be primarily going through flow and orchestra stuff, which I'm sure is shocking to everyone who knows me. There's a lot to unpack in this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go all the way through the slides, and then I'll go back and we'll do a couple of demos because there are some major things in here. We're going to start with, though, collaborative forecasting. I'm curious, how many people in this room are using Salesforce forecasting, the collaborative edition as they are? Anyone? Speak up, put in the chat. Lynette's raising her hand. Okay. 1.
I am.
Rachel. Okay. 2. All right. That is 200% more than I expected. So collaborative forecasting, there's a couple of really neat things that I can see being valuable from the last time I had to do a forecasting for someone. One of them is you can create your own calculated forecast columns now, which is pretty nice. So if you have something that is not going to be using just say the standard dollar amount, you can use that. You can also create or have your custom opportunity fields to include or exclude onto your forecast. That's another thing that I've seen a lot of people do where their opportunity seems to be really kind of custom designed to how they run their business. I have one customer I think has something like 10 different currency value fields that they would put on a forecast depending on what they're forecasting. And then I don't know about how big of a deal this would be for the people using it, but you can have longer adjustments notes. So if someone's going through and say, I'm adjusting this from 200,000 to 400,000 because of blah, 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 it's longer. I guess, yay. But yeah, so that's it for collaborative, and on to the flow stuff. So first big thing, no more workflow rules. So if you try to create a new one, you get this nice little thing that says, hey, workflow rules are not enabled. Try out this flow builder thing. This shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone. We've been talking about this now for quite some time. But if anyone is still stuck on workflow rules, you can technically use process builder if you're not ready to use flow, but you should start using flow. One thing that I'm actually really excited about is cut and paste flow elements. And this seems really stupid, but right now we're able to copy and paste, so we could duplicate things. But if you're using the auto flow, what makes this nice kind of journey-like paths, that's helpful. But if you just really wanted to say, I just need to move the chunk of this flow up above, you would end up having to copy it and then delete the old stuff. You don't have to do that extra step. You can just literally just move a chunk from one part of the flow to the other part of the flow. Whenever I had to do that, I always ended up leaving the auto format, going back to the old drag and drop thing and doing it there, reconnecting everything, saving, and then flipping it back to auto format. So that's really nice. The all incoming to go to connections. So again, this is one of those in the auto layout where if you have say instead of going to and you say, hey, when we get to this element, the next element is actually way over here. Beforehand, you could only see that in the canvas, so you would have to scroll around and try to look for all the connections. Now in the toolbar, so the left panel, there's a new area for those connections, and it'll list out, here's all the connections, and easily find them in your canvas if you need to make changes. Starting with a minor but potentially really big considering workflow rules and process builders going away, is you can now use is clone in record trigger flow formulas. So if you have any automation that you've been going, I can't migrate because we use is clone and therefore we can't do it. Now you don't have that excuse anymore. It's there in the flow formula. More stuff. This one is huge, and this is the ability to update related records. So prior to this, if you were going to say, I have an opportunity, I'm triggered on my opportunity, and I want to update my products, you would have to do a get the opportunity products, then a loop, then something like an assignment within the loop, and then go through every one of the products, and then do an update outside of the loop. We don't have to do that anymore. We can now use the update records. There's a new option to say update related records related to the trigger account. And it works like it does in Process Builder, where we can say, I'm updating this related object, and then you can put conditions on which of those you want to be updating. And I'll show you an example because it's so dang simple. Another one of, oh my God, this is huge, is the use in and not in operators in Flow to find related records. So an example, let's say we have a whole bunch of accounts, and you want someone to go through and say, I'm interested in account A, B, and C. And then you want to get a list of all the contacts or all the opportunities that are associated with those three accounts. Currently in Flow, doing something like that is a horrendous pain in the backside, because you couldn't do that without really running a risk of hitting a limit. But now we could do something that says, hey, go grab all the opportunities where the account ID is in this set of collections of IDs. That's gigantic. I'm so excited. There's been so many things we couldn't do because of that. Some other nice little things that can be a bane of your existence is now you can filter the pick list values based on record type for flow screens. So beforehand, if you're pulling in the values for your pick lists for your screen based on an existing field, it's just going to show all the values you couldn't go through and say, I only want to see the values based on customer type. Now we can, so that's a nice little add-on.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
So quick question, and maybe you don't know the answer, but those first two items on the last slide seem like they're also going to improve the overall query limits and loop limits by being able to use those two features. That seems true.
It doesn't actually change the limits, but it improves it because of the fact it kind of skips the need to do the things that would hit the limit.
Yep. Cool.
So, so are you saying no if loops based on record type in my flow? Potentially, Stuart. I think it depends on your use case. Formula builder. This is a big one for me. We've had the ability to build formulas within Flow for ages.
I can definitely check.
And Chris, I don't think you're muted. But we've been able to do formulas for a long time, and we could do almost everything we could do. Like if we're building a field formula, the one thing we couldn't do is check as we're building the formula whether or not the formula was right. And you had to wait until you hit the save button and for the error to show up to know whether or not a formula was written. And if you did a whole bunch of formulas, you then have to go through and try to figure out which ones you need to fix. Really nice addition to add on. It kind of unifies his formula building to a certain degree. Test suite. So that ability to kind of create flow tests and rerun a test in the debug over and over and over again is now generally available. I haven't played around with this too much. I'm not sure if I'm exactly the right audience for doing these types of things. But I could see some benefits when you are working with a larger shop and you're trying to run testing on here where it'd be useful. Where I see this kind of coming down the line is there's been a lot of talk about, hey, we're basically doing declarative coding at this point. We have a requirement for testing for coding. Maybe we need to have something equivalent for declarative stuff. And maybe this is kind of their way to start building up to that. Selecting multiple records in the lookup. We'll do a demo of this as well as a couple of the other things we talked about, but this is being able to effectively go through and say, I have one lookup field and I want a person to be able to select more than one item in there. And we'll come back to that. Select multiple records from a table. This is another thing that I think is huge and I'm really excited about. It's in beta, so again, you have to take it for what screen worth. I'll show you an example of it just because I think it's so awesome. And then a few different ways we can launch flows. So we can now launch flows with Lightning Web Components, which is nice. You can control whether or not a field shows, a flow shows up on your record based on record field values, but that does require you to be using dynamic forms for that particular instance. Multi-column flow layouts with section components. So there was a beta multi-column component out there, and that's no longer in existence. It's now the section component. Basically it's a lot better. So you can really easily build out nice looking screen flows using the section component with multiple columns and things like that. We've looked at this section component in the past, but it's still pretty neat. I love using it. And then there's the, hey, you can access flows from setup automation home, which I don't use the automation home, but I'm assuming that, for people who do it, that's nice. And then I'll talk about Orchestrator and we'll jump into demo. So Orchestrator is fairly new to Salesforce. There's a lot of kind of interesting foibles to it. It is technically speaking part of your licensing costs if you're using Enterprise Edition or above. The way Orchestrator is set up is you get X many runs per year, which is it's 600. A run is basically any time the Orchestrator starts, it's a run. And then you have to pay if we're going to use more than 600. But there's some improvements to it being able to do things like assign things to credentialed Experience Cloud visitors, so you can use it as part of your portals. You can enable sharing for them, which can be helpful. Reports, so if you are using Orchestrator, being able to just report on the orchestrator objects, like what are I want to report on all my work items, which is what an orchestrator item that's been assigned to a person is called a work item. Report on it, see if it's completed, see if it's not completed. You can always do that. Some just quality of life. I would say I am using orchestrator with a customer right now, and it's going pretty well, but there is some specialness to it that you do need to kind of think about it a little bit differently than most of the other automations. It's basically a way to organize a bunch of flows. So you have to have all those flows built first, then you can build your orchestrator. So it does take you, it does bear in mind that you do need to do your planning upfront a little bit more carefully than if you're used to just building flows and willy-nilly creating stuff. But it's a pretty darn cool tool if you're going to be using it. All right, enough of the boring stuff, flow stuff. So flow stuff. Okay, so let's start with the updating the related items. I'm going to go create a new flow. We'll do record triggered. Okay, and we'll start with opportunity. And let's say, just because of the fact that I want to be able to go through and show you some of these things, even though this really doesn't make sense from a use case standpoint. But let's say we only want to do this when the opportunity is cloned. Okay, so we can now use is cloned. And for those wise people who realize that, hey, you're not supposed to put anything in the is clone function, I'm doing that on purpose because we're going to check the syntax. And it's telling me exactly, hey, there's an error with the is clone. It's expected at no parameters and it got 1. That's a fancy term to say, hey, Brian, you just need to have your open and close parentheses. And now it's valid. Hey, yay. All right. So we hit done. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus sign and we'll go down to update records. I know it's the green checkbox. So it sounds so nice. All right. So we're going to do update products. So you can see that we have a few radio buttons extra. We can update the opportunity that triggered the flow, or we could update related records. And we click that, it collapses a bunch down, and we now have to select what records are related. And it does this by going through the $ record item. So we can go through and we'll just type in the word opportunity line items. All right. By default, you are updating all related records, but we can add a condition. So this is, again, one of those incredibly stupid conditions. But let's say if it's cloned, if there's a clone source ID in there, we actually want to set the unit price to 0. We can do that. So there we go, 1 element, and you're now able to update multiple records. There's no loops, there's no assignments, there's no gets, there's nothing. It's just that one beautiful element. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. This will make upgrading or migrating your existing process builders that probably are updating related records a lot easier to do. And not only is it faster because you only have 1 element to do, but you don't have to worry about the limits as much because you're not having to loop through and grab stuff. All right. Any questions that before we switched over to some of the things on the screen flow? Okay.
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat. No questions, just happy. All right. So this is something I built already because I wanted to make sure it worked before we did the live demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this in debug so you can see what happens, and then I'll show you how it's built. So I'm going to go ahead and click the debug. And we'll just run this. So we start off with a lookup field. So we have accounts here. Well, I'm going to select the Madison account and the Milwaukee account. If I wanted to, I could continue adding additional accounts in here, and I'll click next. And now I see a table with a list of all the contacts associated to the accounts that I just picked. So you can see we got myself in there and Jen's in there, Squire's in there, and hey, that placeholder for potential co-leader, which that's supposed to be that could be you. I clearly did not do a good enough QA job on this demo. But there's also
we need another co-host to help with our edits.
I know we need another co-host. But we can now select items on here, and if I went ahead and did anything else, we could use the items that get selected here to do everything else. So maybe I wanted to go through and send an email. I now have the contact information that I could email the 3 people I selected. So the setup of these is actually surprisingly easy. So here's the lookup field. The lookup field is done exactly the same as it was in that's funny. How did I do that?
Cool.
That is cool. I have no idea how I did that. My water bottle fell onto my keyboard. Here's an easy way to fix it. We'll just cancel and go back in. Okay.
Oh.
I know. I'll play around with that. I'm genuinely curious how I made that SKU. That is awesome.
Multi-column flows.
I'm not using it on this one. I don't know. The difference is when you get down to the attributes, there's a maximum selection, and the default to this is typically 1. So I just all I had to do was go and say, hey, I wanted them to be able to collect 6 accounts, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And what this would do is instead of storing that as just a single variable, it puts it into a collection resource. You can still set defaults. So for example, if we only had 1 here and we wanted to default to the Milwaukee account, I could put the Milwaukee account ID in here or the resource with that ID in there. It'll automatically fill it in. You could do the same thing with multiple accounts if you have this greater than 1 by simply putting in a collection of IDs if you wanted to have a default selection, which so very, very small changes, but that could potentially have a big impact. I know a lot of us use cases where people saying, I want to give people the ability to select multiple items or multiple records. Here's one way that you can do that with very little minimal fuss, as long as you have an existing lookup field that points to that object, and it does not have to be an object or a record that you're querying. So like, I'm not querying for an opportunity or an account or anything like that. I'm basically saying, hey, Salesforce, we're going to use a lookup field that just happens to be on the opportunity object. Okay. For my get records, it's really simple. I say, hey, I'm going to get a contact, and I'm getting contacts where the account ID is in that record ID collection. So if I delete this out, you can see that we have accounts right here. This represents the lookup field from our screen. Now, if I click in there, it says record IDs, record ID collection. So that is the collection of IDs that were selected in the lookup field. So this one line is now going to let me look up who knows how many contacts based on the number of IDs that are passed in that collection. One thing I thought was interesting is it did default this to say only the first record, which seems a little silly to me. If you are doing an in, you're probably expecting more than 1 record. So just make sure that you have all records selected, and you won't have the 30 seconds of why am I only getting 1 record when I know I have 4 when you're building your demo. So I can't tell you how long I've been waiting and complaining about needing to do it in operator for Flow, like literally years. It is so wonderful. And then here's the data table. Now I will say the data table is beta, but I could see a lot of value coming out of this. One of the things I've gotten a lot of times when I was helping people with Flow is them saying, hey, I just want to be able to list more than 1 record at a time. And Flow has not historically had the capabilities of doing that unless you built in a custom Lightning component or find a Lightning component off of unofficial SF or the App Exchange or something like that. Now we have the data table. The data table essentially starts with saying, hey, you're going to have a table, and then you need to specify a collection of what you're going to use. So in my situation, I'm using the contacts that we did in our Get. But this could be anything. It could be a whole bunch of opportunities. It could just be a custom collection, text collection where you gathered, say, phone numbers or email addresses or something like that. It really doesn't matter. Then we have options for how do you want to have it viewed. I had this selected multiple, which allowed us to check off multiple rows in that data table. But we can say, hey, you can only select one, or you can't select any. It's just view only. So really nice for the type of things of you want to have them just view the data for reference purposes before you did something with it. And then there's a bunch of things regarding being able to minimize or maximize the number of rows that are get selected. And that's all you really have to do as far as the base setup.
Is there a row limit? You can define the minimum maximum, but is there a limit like, hey,
I don't
2,000?
know. That is a good question, Jeffrey. I did not see a row limit in the release notes. Off the top of my head, I don't remember that. But I would imagine there's a practical limit just because of the number of lists. So my guess is you wouldn't want to ever show more than 2,000 records. That's for sure. Yeah, I don't know. That'll be something to look into. You do have to configure the columns that are in your data table. So here you can see I have the item selected to add a new one. You hit add column. And now you do have to specify a value from the collection. So this is showing all my contact fields because the collection I specified is a list of contacts. And all you need to do is pick the field that you want. Let's do birth date. You do not have to use that label. You could put in your own custom label if you wanted to. And then there's a choice for clip text or wrap text. I really recommend doing wrap text as default, mainly because you have minimal control over the width of the screen of the person who's launching this. I did have some funky situations where because my browser window wasn't taking up the full monitor screen, my columns got truncated because there wasn't enough space to show the entire width. But if I had wrap text on it, wrapped it appropriately, if it's clipped, it just stops it. But there we go. We just added a birthday. Okay. So those are the big flow things that got me really excited about is primarily being able to select multiple records very easily, being able, but mainly doing this is just huge. At this point, I can't think of a single reason why you would need to create a process builder over a flow. Other than the fact that you're not comfortable with flows. I don't know. Can anyone think of another reason why you would opt to do a process builder over a flow at this point?
Never.
Yeah.
Attaboy or girl or whoever.
I like
Yeah.
the UI better for process builder than flow.
Interesting.
Interesting. I mean, I can kind of see that, but considering all the aura timeouts I get these days with process builder, I'm happy to get rid of it. So Christian says, especially with all the UI features over process, I'm seeing strictly with flows. Yeah.
I mean, I would go as far as say that if you are making a decision about a flow or a process based just on the builder UI or your comfort, I hope that is a call to action to like use some personal development time to get more comfortable and confident in that space, because it's only a matter of time till you have to, so might as well start now.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, do you know, is this new the new component you just displayed, is this an iteration on Eric's version, or is it their own homegrown? Do you know? Like Eric Smith had the one that's on Unofficial SF, and there's a lot of super similarities there.
Eric says that it is their own invention, although they did meet with Eric to help to build it. So he gave a lot of advice and architecture around it, but it is not his code. It is their own code. But a lot of how they built it and how it was the layout and experience was drawn up very similar to what Eric has. But Eric indicated it. No, it's their own beast, and they're going to be able to then advance it and iterate it within their own cycle.
That Smith DNA is pretty clear though, so I'm gonna say that it's brother from another mother type development, right?
Yeah. But he did indicate that when it comes down to like at the core level, they're dealing with some of the same issues, problems, roadblocks that he came up with how do you get those records in a collection? And there are limits, like not necessarily limits with what you can display, but limits with what you can put in a collection and iterate it over a time. So that's why in my chat notes, I said, I think he ran into errors after 1,000 collections in a record.
Yeah.
Then you start to say, well, it's not that I can't display more than that. It's like, what do I do with more than that? So there are some decisions.
I mean, just realistically speaking, in my opinion, if you're hitting anywhere close to 100 records, I would really question the user experience at that point.
Agreed.
So, yeah. Well, the reason why, Christian, if you look at Process Builder, there's an internal recommendation to use flows is because of the fact Salesforce has announced workflow rules and Process Builder are going away, and flows is the new direction. So I just want to cut this element. I love the fact that it asks you on the decision which path you want to cut, and it highlights it to show you what's being included. So I hit cut, paste. Oh, so smooth.
So cool.
I love it. All right. Any questions?
No.
Do we know when Process Builder is processed? What have I? No. Here's my 2 cents on that. I think migrating processes is very hard. Not because it can't be done, because it's building a flow behind the scenes, but because of the fact that a given process doesn't necessarily mean you are going to get one flow out of it. I've looked at a lot of people's processes, and if I went through that list and said, this is what the flow looks like, I have yet to find a process that was going to turn into a single flow for optimized purposes, with the exception of the one that literally only had one node in it, one little blue diamond. And that's just because the way processes run and flows run are so different that if you want to take advantage of how flows can be optimized, you're best off building your automation for migration with that in mind. And what I mean by that is, in Process Builder, you could have an action that says it's triggering off an opportunity, and we're going to update a field on the opportunity, and we're going to send an email. In Process Builder, that happens all after. But in Flow, you can run updates on the triggering object in a before context, and it's significantly faster. It's just more optimized. So that would be an example where I would say, yeah, it's one node with 2 actions. I would actually split that into 2 flows, one to send the email in the after context, one to update the field in the before context. That's my long-winded 2 cents. All right, any other comments, questions?
What's what I mean, I know the answer, but I would like to just hear it, is the pre-activation debugging of flows, now that that's GA. Should that be required? Should you have to debug before you can activate?
speaking from a best practice standpoint, yes, but, and the answer to the reason why there's a but is there are some things you can't debug yet.
Okay.
For an example, I had a flow that ran off of, I believe it was opportunity contact role, but you can't select a contact role in the debugger.
All right.
I don't know. So how can I, if I have a requirement to debug before I use it, that would be one that where I can never use it because I can debug it. Right. But generally speaking, Burrow should all be building this automation in a sandbox, and we should be debugging it and running functional tests before it goes anywhere anyways. Right.
I only ask because, I mean, I think about code coverage and how code coverage doesn't necessarily mean the code works, but you got to take the time to run it. So I feel like even if you just had to click debug once and it was part of the activation process, it might be a pain in the butt, but at the same time, it starts to get people thinking about it's not going to work if you don't think about the debug first. So anyway, it's there's 61 half a dozen another, right? Then the other is, well, how many times do you have to run it? Every time you create a new version, you have to debug it. That's a pain in the butt. What if it's one node? What if it's, what if it's just a screen component with a button in the middle of it? I don't need to debug. So I'm torn there myself.
Right. And there's no option right now to create test records.
Right.
Right. So it's not the same animal. Yeah. I would say if we talked idealized, I would say, idealized world where everything worked right, I would agree that, yeah, everything should have to get debugged first before from a version standpoint before it got activated. But not everything can be debugged yet. And not everything is going to be debugged if you if you're going to send an email.
Right.
There's like nothing in the debug for that, right?
Yep.
But considering that we can update, create, delete records and do it in mass, yeah, I mean, we should, but I'm not sure about making it required at this point. Anything else?
Well, to your point, one of the things that's kind of interesting about that too, is you talk about to test code coverage and everything else, is that allegedly flow is declarative. And I've sort of always been in a place where I wonder how declarative it is, because you still have to have a measure of programming skill to understand what a loop is, what a variable is, what a formula is, how all that works. And so even, for somebody who doesn't have any coding experience at all, I think that jumping into flow is probably not as simple as Salesforce would make it seem. And if you start talking about adding things like code coverage, you're pushing it even further away from a truly declarative environment. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just kind of how I feel about that whole thing. I don't disagree that it's a best practice, but at the same time, from an implementation standpoint, to me, it seems like you're pushing it further away from a normal human.
I mean, I think the argument I always heard, Scott, was the fact that the idea of declared automation not requiring something like code coverage was because, well, it's so limited in what you can do. Like the risk to it is so small. But I remember when Process Builder came out, people started talking about, well, shouldn't we require something for process builders? Because you could do so much damage with a process builder that was not properly vetted. And, doubly so with flow. But just because something is declarative doesn't mean you shouldn't have a test requirement.
I mean, I'd even add, like, there's nothing about declarative that suggests you don't have to think like a programmatic developer. Declarative and programmatic development are just methodologies, not thinking, right? I mean, I'll go as far as say, just because I can put a field on a layout doesn't mean I don't have to understand like experience design. Just because I can create a validation rule doesn't mean I don't have to understand data quality measures, right? So I think assuming that declarative means easy or I don't want to say easy. Declarative doesn't suggest that you're not experienced or have a knowledge level. I would say it's more along the line of what does doing something declarative require underneath the covers.
It's also a reason why Salesforce is saying the code.
Well,
Yeah,
and people
I
use-
mean, I agree, and to your point also, I mean, you can destroy your org with flow, right? I mean, you could essentially write a flow to delete every single record. Having said that, code coverage is not going to prevent you from doing that.
No, but you know, it's one of those things that if people were writing test code
That's a test code.
the way they should be writing test code, that the code coverage is intended to ensure that you're at least testing the code, then yeah, it would work. But the reality is, I know plenty of program Apex developers out there that literally have called this class +1+1+1+1, you know, for 100,000 lines to get like the 75% code coverage, you know, something ridiculous like that, because they just wanted to get it done. There's always going to be the ways to get around the intention behind the requirement. And the question is, how do we take the intentions and build things to make the intentions easy to accomplish without, you know, losing out the fact that, well, being able to deliver on the intention, right? I think if anyone could say here, if we had a really easy way to ensure that before we deployed a flow that it did what we wanted to do, I don't think anyone will say, no, that sounds horrible. It's always it depends on how many hoops you have to jump through to get there, right? The more hoops you are, the more challenging you make it, the more less likely people want to do it.
We'll also say you should build things not in production.
Right. I mean, and how many people, Jeffrey, do we know that still build things in production, even though they've heard
Not me.
over and over and over again not to? Right, because it's a hoop, and people, it's one of those downfalls of Salesforce has kind of killed their own best practices, because they kept saying you could go so fast with Salesforce, but just because you can go really, really fast doesn't mean you should go fast with no brakes. I feel like I'm getting on a soapbox now. Can you get soapboxes still? I mean, everything's like, you know, liquid soap. It's like just a cardboard box, because that wouldn't be a really good thing to stand on. All right. So that's pretty much our presentation. Insert Spider-Man point of view. Anything's possible with the internet? Sure. So we have Dreamforce coming up, and then we are doing Milwaukee in October. Do we have a date, Squire?
No, but assume the second Tuesday of next month. I'm working with a couple of vendor contacts to try to get that scheduled.
Okay. What we're going to try to be doing is this new joint meeting type that we did for this one, where essentially we have a primary meeting and then we have a joint invitation. So for folks who are in Milwaukee, if you affiliate yourself more to Milwaukee, you'll be able to join directly with Milwaukee. Folks who affiliate primarily with Madison, you can join through Madison, and it will be treated as a single meeting. But in this case, both user groups kind of get credit for the attendance, which is nice on the back end for a whole bunch of reasons. And it will also make it a little bit easier from a attendance standpoint. As for November, we are planning on having something in November. Topic is open at this moment. So if people have requests, reach out to Jen and I, and we'll see what we can get done before our November time. Go will be probably the second Tuesday in November, which would be the 8th, to give us a good week prior to Thanksgiving. And as always, if anyone has other things that they would like to bring up for stories, project successes, failures, please reach out. We would love to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, I before everybody drops, I'm just curious. I'm a big fan of the new Salesforce DevOps package that they did a private beta, and now they're in beta. And I'd love to present some of that if people are interested. It might not be applicable to the majority of the groups, so that might be something we do in the next couple months as well.
And the other thing we'll probably put out is sometime between now and the end of the year, or maybe shortly after, we'll probably put a member survey out there, just so we can be better in touch with what are people using. You know, for example, I hate asking how many people are using Service Cloud or using collaborative forecasting, things like that, because we do spend time to try to tailor these overviews based on what we believe our end users or our members are actually using. Because as we know, Salesforce has gotten huge. It's impossible to cover everything. It will also help us tailor any other topics outside of the overview, so we can kind of hit the things that are most interesting to people. So the reason I don't know exactly when it's coming out is because it's gonna be a funky survey. We got to figure out how do we fill it in without making it 30 million pages long and a pain to fill out. So, all right. With that, we'll say au revoir, and I hope everyone has a good rest of the September and good trip to Dreamforce if you're going to the Dreamforce.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
DevOps does sound amazing.